Hey guys, we're back. R Squared Fantasy Football, after a long hiatus, is back for the offseason. We just made it back in time for the trade and free agent frenzy, so I think we kind of wanted to break it down, see what's going on. I'm Ian. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyIM.
And I'm Akash. You can find me on Twitter at YZR_fantasy.
And we're going to just jump right into kind of the first major section of news before free agency really hit, which was Amari Cooper's getting traded to Cleveland Browns. So we can kind of talk about that trio of last year's Cowboys receivers, Gallup, CD, Cooper, kind of what we can look at going forward.
Yeah, even Dalton Schultz, he got franchise tag still there. Gallup got the 5-year deal. Kind of crazy. Not as much as Christian Kirk's money though. So
no. That's number 3 wide receiver in the league money.
Of course, Christian Kirk's worth it. Never had a 1,000-yard season. Don't think he's never been top 24 in fantasy points per game, but I think Drew's liking it nonetheless.
Yeah, so Amari Cooper, I think the first thing that we should kind of hit on is that CD Lamb and Amari Cooper are no longer teammates, which I say this because kind of the narrative, or a lot of what you see when you see like Amari Cooper or especially CD Lamb hype about him like ascending into that wide receiver 1 territory, is that Amari Cooper is on the team and he's holding him back from getting that alpha target share. Mm-hmm. Or like it's also being said with Amari Cooper sometimes where it's, all right, Amari Cooper's now on a new team. What's holding him back from a major target or a massive target share when CD Lamb isn't with him anymore? The problem is it's not really a normal thing when you have two guys at 20% target share or less to both be holding each other back, because that's kind of saying that no one's alphaing these targets. Like there's no one that's taking the alpha amount of targets away from anyone.
Right. No one's stepping up as the alpha. And so they're not really holding each other back. They're just both being fake alphas.
That's a good way to put it. And I think that Cleveland is probably, I mean, we obviously don't know what's going to happen, but Cleveland in a wide receiver sense is probably one of the worst places that you could go. Mm-hmm. Think of like Odell Beckham Jr., who, yeah, he wasn't his alpha target share Odell Beckham Jr. that we saw in New York with his time before it ended in Cleveland. But when he left, his peripherals were still good. He was like an 18% target share guy. He was solid yards per run. He was being a good wide receiver, just not the Odell-esque. But his fantasy stock was being absolutely nuked by a bad passing offense, low volume passing offense. And I don't track this, but I remember looking at some metric that was out there that Cleveland is one of the worst with their wide receivers in fantasy football, just because most of their team targets are going to other positions other than wide receiver, unlike most teams.
When was during what range of years?
It was when it was just last year. It was a stat from last year, and it was when Odell left. And it was just a stat. I wish I had it on me, but it was.
Yeah, when you're paying both Austin Hooper and David Njoku big money, that's probably going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, you probably need to give them like 14% target shares, 10% target shares. Call it good.
Capping each other. But yeah, Amari in Cleveland is probably going to continue being the same Amari, 20% target share guy that we've seen for his entire career. Could be a low volume offense again. Of course, there's never any guarantees like we saw with Baltimore last year. There's always a chance that teams pass more because passing volume is very turbulent year to year. But unless that's like very priced out, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of Amari Cooper at all, because he's never been a guy to dominate targets. Going to this offense that hasn't been great for wide receivers, a low volume offense, and changing teams typically leads to a downturn in production. So I don't think that I expect Amari Cooper to be great for fantasy. I think he could be like top 30, but other than that, I don't expect much more than that.
Yeah, and his peripherals, like we've been talking about, where he's like this 20% target share guy that he has been his whole career. He's probably going to do that again next year. Wide receivers typically, like when they go to a new team, they don't drastically just get worse. Sometimes we see like a little bit of a target share drop because you have to get used to the new offense or whatever it was, but we really don't see them not be who they have been, especially when he's still going to be 28 years old by the time next season starts. So he's not at that age cliff yet. But the problem is when we're looking at this, so Amari Cooper had that 18-20% target share with the Cowboys, who were passing at a mediocrely decent volume. They were about middle of the pack, maybe on the upper end, especially this last year. And then he was also playing with Dak. And like just looking at the last like 4 years, 3 of the 4 years he's putting up above a 6.5% TD percentage, which is really good. The problem is that when you go to Cleveland, and especially if Baker Mayfield's the quarterback, you're not exactly going to have that super high efficient passing offense. Like if I was to look at just last year what Baker's TD percentage was, it was 4%, which it's not
great.
It's not terrible. Like it's not being on the Denver Broncos bad,
Very true.
which we'll hit on later, but it's not. It's a difference from Dak, where Amari Cooper is putting up that 6-7% touchdown percentage, which helps you a lot in fantasy.
That's true. That's a good point. And then now the part that everyone's like really come here for: does Amari Cooper leaving make CeeDee Lamb better at football? Fundamentally, no. Why? Tell me.
Well, kind of like what we said, a player is who that player is. A lot of people kind of trick themselves into like when a new player gets into a new situation or a player leaves and that player is all of a sudden boosted into that wide receiver one, quote unquote, role on the team. But the problem is that these players are who they are. So whether like, let's just take Amari Cooper, for example, because he's someone that's played for 7 or 8 years. Like it's pretty nailed down who he is. The problem is Amari Cooper could go to the Cincinnati Bengals, let's say, and he's a wide receiver 3, putting up around like what he usually does. He's the wide receiver 3 on the team. The difference is that there's not a difference if he were to be in Cleveland and he's the wide receiver 1, because he's still going to likely earn the same percentage of targets that he has his entire career.
Right.
Going over there doesn't just make you instantly better. You're still who they are. Otherwise, we would see all these things where like players switch teams and all of a sudden they become this alpha target share dominator that they were out of nowhere. Like
we would see Marquez Callaway break out last year instead of putting up 9 points per game. I thought he was the wide receiver 1 on that team. No, it's not how.
Well, that's a great example too, because not just Marquez Callaway. Think of last year, how many, especially redraft. Just looking at the year ahead, think about how many people had a Detroit Lions wide receiver in their like top 20. I think it was Tyrell Williams was like the big name in like the top 25 of redraft wide receivers. Like
really, I don't remember him that high. I remember getting him a lot of like round 19ish, round 20
in redrafts.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I might be thinking of like 1 or 2 specific tweets that I remember where he was top 25 redraft. But still, even putting him top 40 is pretty egregious because that's not who he's been his entire career. And just because he was playing with a team that really didn't have a ton of options, it doesn't exactly make you better. It doesn't mean you're going to all of a sudden just earn way more targets than you ever have.
Right, which sidebar, like that the fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown did what he did, even that he did, all of his production mostly came from when Swift and Hawkinson were out. That doesn't mean that he's going to be worse when they come back, because he still earned his targets well while they were out, and he still produced well. So I don't find myself buying a lot of the Amon-Ra St. Brown narratives that pop up, but a lot of people think that Chark's going to supplant him or anything when they play completely different roles. I don't think DJ Chark's going to end up lining up in the slot or anything or stealing his targets. So quick sidebar there. But yeah, I do expect CeeDee Lamb to remain. I think he'll be a productive wide receiver too, yet again. It's a high volume, efficient offense. I think his route participation could go up because it was around like 80% last year. And so if it does go up, we could see a slight bump there, but I don't think it's going to be enough to validate all of the people that think he's top 5 or even close to that. I think he's just going to be a good wide receiver too.
Yeah. And I mean, I could see him being as high as like a fringe wide receiver.
Yeah, he can be a fringe wide receiver 1. Yeah,
because he has a good quarterback on a good efficient offense that passes the ball a decent amount.
He can catch enough touchdowns and it happens.
CeeDee Lamb's good.
Yeah,
he's just not this alpha target share. The problem is when you have all these, because there's a ton of good wide receivers that come up, a ton of good wide receiver prospects. You don't actually have a ton of alpha target share wide receivers in the NFL.
Right. It takes a lot to make it in the NFL, and it takes a lot to dominate in the NFL. There's only a few players that do it.
Yeah. So like that's kind of the issues that CD Lamb's really good. You're
He's
just
just
putting
also
him in that
overrated.
range. Yeah, you're just putting him in the range where there's these 1% of wide receivers that are insane.
Right. Exactly.